Let me see. No, I'm still seeing. All right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn off my view of myself.
Okay.
Way, I don't care.
Okay.
Um,
Now remember that it's going to record what you're seeing on your screen.
oh, okay, never mind. I won't do that.
I think if you turn your camera off, you won't be seen. You'll only be heard.
All right, we won't risk that. Okay.
Okay. We don't want an hour of that. We can try that sometime.
Right. Well, I mean, I would love an hour of just you, but
No.
okay, let's go ahead. Let's get started. Real talk, messy faith, a lot of grace. This is Untangling Faith podcast with Tammy and Laura, and we are so glad that you're here.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. We're so glad that you're here. I am, if you're going to use all the words, Reverend Laura Hutchinson. I have a member of my church who always calls me Padre. Other people call me Rev and all those good things. But anyway, I'm Laura. I'm the pastor at First Christian Church in Anniston, Alabama. That's a church with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ denomination. And I'm very happy to have y'all here. I'm excited about this particular topic. It is not controversial. It is not highly emotional. It is just, I think this is a healthy topic. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm Tammy Jackson. Again, if we're using all the right titles, Reverend Tammy Jackson. I'm an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church. I'm currently serving a congregation in Anniston, Alabama. I have a congregation member who calls me Pasta. A little 4-year-old who is adorable, and her way of saying pastor is pasta. And it makes everybody think I need to be like a little piece of rotini with curly hair coming out of it. And I once had a friend who called me Reveroo. So yeah, we get called, and I'll answer to anything except I'd rather not be called sister.
Right.
In there, as far as like
one person used to call me the Right Reverend Bishop.
Okay. But Right Reverend is an official title in some denominations. And so you might be elevating me to a position I don't hold.
Right.
I will disagree with you just a little bit as we talk about the topic today about Sabbath, that I'm not sure it's not a little controversial. The idea that we can rest and we don't have to constantly be being productive, and the idea that we don't have to get it all done before we do. I think hustle culture is a huge thing in our society. And when you resign from it, I think it ticks a lot of people off.
Yeah. Yeah, it is an act of rebellion. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're right. In fact, so most of what I'm doing, a lot of what I'm talking about today is going to come from two particular books that I've read in the past. And one is called, I'm looking them up so I get it right. One is Sabbath as Resistance by Walter Brueggemann. And let me see, why is my Kindle not working? So I think our internet must not be doing great today. Our Wi-Fi isn't acting properly. Okay, so one is Sabbath as Resistance. I'll pull up the whole thing when it's done loading. And I spent some time this morning. One of the reasons why I was late is because I was rereading the book. Not rereading the whole book, but just sort of my notes and everything. And then saying no to the culture of now, which is a phenomenal book, by the way. And if anybody wants to read it, that's backwards and you can't see it, but that's what the cover looks like. Yeah. Sabbath as Resistance.
It actually looks correct when I see it.
Does it? Okay, good. All right.
Yeah, it read correctly. Yeah.
The other book that has been an inspiration to me is called Sabbath in the Suburbs by Marianne McKibben Dana. And that's the cover there. And this is about, it's called a family experiment with holy time. And it's written by a pastor. a working pastor serving a church with kids and a husband, and reflecting on the fact that taking a whole day off a week to do nothing is impossible in the family structure. And so what did that mean for them, and how do they observe the Sabbath, and how did they work that into their essentially responding to the culture of now, which is, I think, the culture that a lot of families deal with. So
Yes, true.
um, yeah, that's definitely the demands of families, I think, are even higher than it is for older couples or for single people or couples without children. I just don't,
Mhm.
I think it's a different, there's a whole other level of pressure to show up, to perform,
Mhm.
and to produce that doesn't translate quite as strongly to people without kids.
Okay. Well, I've been a mother. I have two grown sons, and I had a friend during my children's growing up years that had four children, and she allowed her children to choose one thing a year to be involved in.
Yes.
And I remember thinking how sad for her children
Uh-huh.
that they weren't getting to do all the things. And now, from this perspective on the other side, when my children are now 28 and 30, and one of them is fixing to be a parent himself, I look back and I realize we don't do our children a favor by scheduling every moment,
Yeah.
by letting them do too many things. There is benefit to being bored because our creativity sparks when we're bored. We have to have time for creativity and innovation to come to the forefront. And if we are always busy, we never have time. I just said this because I've just had a new associate pastor come on staff. We've been understaffed for a good while now. And he was saying, "What do you need me to do? What are the main things you want me to focus on?" And I said, "I am in desperate need of some margin in my work life because I don't have time to think through the things.
Hmm.
I need the time to figure out how that will work and what are the pitfalls. And that just simply takes time." I said, "I feel like right now my work life is a giant game of whack-a-mole. What is the crisis today that I must try to tamp down?" And that's not a healthy rhythm. So I think we overschedule our children. I think we are crushing their creativity. I think it diminishes their intellect. I'm not saying children shouldn't be in activities, they should, but we should not feel every moment of it. So refusing to overschedule our children, refusing to initiate our children into hustle culture when they're 3 or 4 also is an act of rebellion against the world, and I think obedience to God.
Hmm.
One of the books that has been formative to me is a book called Soul Keeping by John Ortberg. If I get there. Um, John Ortberg and I probably don't share a lot in common theologically, but we share this idea of needing to tend our soul, to have time, to have Sabbath, that pleasing God does not mean being exhausted, and that God's love is not measured. We do not earn God's love by the measure of our productivity and our output. We are
Right.
loved by God because of who we are,
Right.
and we will best be who God wants us to be when we refuse to work ourselves to exhaustion all the time.
Right. Right. Now
And that's been a hard lesson for me.
um, I'm looking up something really quick. I'm
And
looking
while
up.
you're doing that, this has been a hard lesson for me. Sabbath is something we're told in scripture to take, but it was something I didn't take terribly seriously. What I remember about Sabbath growing up were the Sabbath laws that we ended up calling blue laws. And so a lot of things were closed on Sunday. You couldn't go grocery shopping. You couldn't do that until I was middle school, maybe high school. Not a lot of restaurants were open
Yeah.
on Sundays. And so you were Sabbath was something that made your life inconvenient. You had to think about it on another day, or you had to wait for it. And I remember being excited when we could go to church and go out to eat afterwards.
Right.
I think it did give my mother a little bit more Sabbath because she didn't have to get up early, start the cooking to be able to feed us all after church. But I didn't see it as something that we enjoyed and lived through. My computer is telling me its battery's going to die because I didn't plug it in. Find my
That's the
cord.
defining characteristic of my morning.
Yeah.
Not plugging in my.
See, there my light comes back.
Hi.
Yeah.
So
I do appreciate my computer warning me by getting dim instead of just going dark.
Right. Just shutting down in the middle of your story. So there's a thing that I think a lot of people don't know about. They maybe have never heard of the Protestant work ethic, which is an element of our culture that I think has formed the foundation and groundwork of our commitment to busyness.
Mm-hmm.
So the Protestant, I looked it up, AI defines it as this, and I'll keep this, I won't double check it because it sounds like what I was taught. It's a concept in sociology and history that emphasizes the virtue of hard work, thrift, and self-discipline, often seen as a key element in the rise of capitalism. It's rooted in religious beliefs, particularly within Protestant denominations like Calvinism, where diligence and efficiency were seen as signs of God's grace or divine favor. Working for the sake of working is a virtue in the Protestant work ethic. It's not even working for the sake of earning. It's simply working for the sake of working.
But you should be busy.
Yeah, that became a concept of a virtue within our culture. Again, born out of Calvinism. I'm such a fan of Calvin. Anyway, he did so many good things for us and for Christianity. Anyway,
But the reason that staying busy was good is because if you had too much free time, that's when you got in trouble. That's when you would drink and dance and make poor decisions and spend all your money and have affairs and fall in love and stuff.
do all
Those kind of things. So you should be working all the time.
Yeah, do all those things that he tried to legalize or make illegal in Geneva when he took over. Yeah.
And the flip that we see a little bit of that still out there today in the idea that we want everyone to earn. Like we oppose welfare because, well, they need to be working, they need to earn it. And so that is also rooted in that Protestant work ethic. Now, they did base it on scripture. There, Paul makes a statement, he who will not work shall not eat, to quote the King James, because that's usually how it's quoted. And it is true that we don't want to foster or reward laziness,
Right.
but there's a lot of ground in the middle between doing nothing and doing something all the time.
Yeah. So the idea of Sabbath is, at least as it is, and I think we need to probably read that commandment in Exodus. I don't know if you've got that up in front of you, but the idea of Sabbath is that you do actually work for 6 days, and then you rest on the seventh.
Yeah.
And it's not saying that everybody should just sit around and get handouts. That's not it.
Right.
But what I think that Sabbath really does is it values balance. It emphasizes balance in life, and that God is a God of balance, and God is a God of work and rest, of productivity and recuperation and quality time. That God is not a slave driver. God is compassionate and loving and all of those things. In addition to being a hardworking, creative God. And we are made in God's image, and so therefore we are given those same graces and those same expectations by God because of that. So,
yeah.
So I have the scripture that established the idea of Sabbath. First, we get that in Genesis. I'm just going to quote that one off the top of my head. And on the seventh day, God rested and it was good, right? So God worked and created for 6 days. And then on the seventh day, God rested. That's Genesis 1. But then we come back to Exodus chapter 20. This is verse 8. Remember the Sabbath. This is the fourth commandment of the 10 commandments that Moses came down from the Mount Sinai to give to the Jewish people. This is immediately following their mass exodus from Egypt out of slavery where they had to work grueling nonstop hours every day from morning until night with no rest because Pharaoh and Pharaoh's gods demanded ultimate productivity. For the sake of Pharaoh, for the sake of the gods, for the sake of Egypt, and all of those kinds of things. And so this is the context out of which they've come, and now they hear this from their one true God. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So this is this in and of itself is a major rebellion against the status quo of the culture in the world of that day. And obviously, as we've already established, whether it was in our early pre-talk or whatever, there's no difference, I think, in our world today compared to the day of Pharaoh. The name of the gods have changed.
Yeah.
And the slave driver is different. But other than that, the behavior, the mentality, the concept, everything is the same.
Yes. And you were talking about the Israelites coming out of Egypt where they have been required to work gruelingly. And there's even a place, the very first time in human history, as recorded in the Bible, that humans were made too busy to worship, to rest and be with God, is actually in Exodus. And it's when Moses has gone to Pharaoh and said, hey, we'd like to go have a 3-day retreat and worship our God like y'all worship your gods. Now they weren't planning to come back. So Pharaoh probably knows that. But that's the request. And Pharaoh's response is, well, if they have time to be thinking about all that, then they have too much time on their hands. Make them keep making the same number of bricks, but now don't give them the resources. Make them go get their own straw, their own mud, but still make the same number of bricks. That's the first time we're ever too busy as human beings. And I think our culture continues to do that to us, to try to make us too busy to realize who we are in God, to realize how we were created to be, to make us believe what they tell us is to just keep us too busy to have any other thought.
Yeah.
Because if you are busy working 2 or 3 jobs, running from place to place, you don't have time to think about what do I deserve? What do I want? What are my hopes and dreams? What's my purpose? The only thing you can think about is I need to make money so that I can pay the bill or take care of the kids.
Yes. And on the other flip side, it's we need to stay busy because I think boredom has become something that we are inherently afraid of. We're afraid of becoming bored. We're afraid of, we are so overstimulated as a culture. My mom's phone broke the other day. She went, I think, 36 hours without being able to use her phone at all. Like she couldn't even check the time. And she was a wreck. What do I do with my time now? And, oh my God, she picked up a real book with pages in it and read a real book. And we had real conversations. And that was 36 hours. And then her phone got fixed and we're all right back to where we are again.
Okay.
Boyfriend constantly criticizes me
Yes.
because I have my phone in my hand all the time. And it's so frustrating to him. And I have to say that he's right. You know, I get irritated with him when he gets on me. I'm like, leave me alone. I have reasons for this. But the fact is, I think our phones have become time fillers so that
Yeah.
we have zero idle time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I like to say that I look at my phone so that I can rest my brain because I'm playing a game or doing something like that and just doing something silly. But the fact is that I am constantly stimulating and entertaining my brain because I don't know how to rest it anymore.
And there's science behind that,
Mm.
that screen time is not restful time to us because we are getting dopamine hits. And so many of the platforms, whether it's games or social media, are designed to give us those dopamine hits, likes, follows, comments, things we like, things that make us smile. And
We
we want more of that. So we end up staying there longer, and it's not restful. It actually contributes to cortisol buildup in our bodies. Cortisol makes us hold weight. It makes us feel stressed. It interferes with our sleep. It interferes with our digestion. It has a lot of negative effects on us. It's the reason many times your counselor, your therapist, your teacher, your fitness coach even will say, put your phone down. You need a Sabbath from your phone. 1 hour a day, 1 day a week without your phone.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we're
I
talking,
get the 1 hour a day. I can do that. I have not yet learned to do a whole day every week.
yeah, yeah, that's a tough one. I have for Lent and things taken Sabbath from social media, which is,
Mm-hmm.
and I do that on vacation as well. Um, I tend to not post anything, and I don't even scroll or look. I tend to what I do is delete the app from my phone. Um,
Mm.
I already don't allow notifications on my phone when I do have Facebook on it because that's
Okay.
intrusive. That I go to Facebook, Facebook does not call me. So,
Yeah.
but even on vacations, I'll just delete it off my phone so that I can't even just click on it
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
take a rest from all of that. The only time I'm holding my phone on vacation is when I'm taking pictures.
Okay.
You know, um, so I want to go back to go back to Egypt. Okay, so it's all
Mhm.
about the context. Why did God feel it was necessary to write this down in the first place? Uh, it's a Walter Brueggemann in his book really breaks it down in a spectacular way. I'm gonna totally botch it in my attempt to explain it, but what he talks about is that here these Jewish people, the Israelites, have come out of Egypt. They have, like you said, they have been worked so hard that they don't have time to worship anymore. They've been in
Mhm.
Egypt for how many hundreds of years? Was it 400? I
I
think they've
think
been
so.
free for
Mhm.
400 years, and um, they've actually they don't even know their God anymore. They don't know their one true God, which is interesting. They're praying out, they're calling out to God for salvation and to be saved from slavery, but they have not been allowed to spend any
Mhm.
time studying, learning, and loving God. So they don't even know the their
Mhm.
God anymore. And so God is sort of reintroducing God's self to the people with these 10
Mhm.
commandments. And saying, first of all, I am one. I am. I exist. They don't. Basically, I don't
Mhm.
exist. The Egyptian gods that have been shoved down your throats for all these years, they don't exist. They don't love you.
Okay.
And here's the difference between me and them, right? I want all your attention, like them. I want all your love and all of your worship and all. I want all of it from you. But
Mhm.
here's ha- uh, where we divert and leave that path. You're going to rest. I rest. You rest. We take care
Mhm.
of each other. We take care of ourselves. And we don't just rest, but everybody rests. So if you look at that, even the foreigner rests, you know, he doesn't got or that Moses and when he reads these commandments to them, there is no room for finding loopholes
Mhm.
and saying, okay, well, I'm going to rest, but my slave who isn't Jewish, who isn't an Israelite, it can keep working that day so that we can be productive.
It's not even can keep working, but that the commandment that the women, the children, the animals, and the foreigners, the immigrants get to rest too, is to keep us from making them work so that we can rest. It's about not being oppressive. It's about how we're all supposed to have that benefit of Sabbath.
Yeah, that's really what I was getting at.
Because I loved the show Downton Abbey.
Me too.
Totally got pulled into it. But I remember realizing that the idea of a weekend didn't exist in that time, that it's a fairly new invention for us. And so something was said about the weekend, and Madam Crawley says, "What is this weekend thing?" So they would get time to rest, but the household servants didn't. They were still attended. We went on a photo safari to South Africa as a family, and we had a tour guide named James. I'm sure it wasn't his official name, but we called him James. And we asked him, like, what was his day off? Because we were there for 6 nights, and so 7 days. And he was with us the whole time. When do you get time off? Like, when is your weekend? What's your day off? And he's like, I don't get a day off. And so his rhythm was he worked 30 days and then he got 2 days off. And so he stayed at the game place. Can't remember what it was called, but there for his work time. And then he got to go home and see his family for 2 days before coming back and working another 30-day stretch. That to me would not be in the rhythm of what God would want for us.
Yeah. So Brueggemann says, God and God's people in the world are not commodities to be dispatched for endless production, and so dispatched, as we used to say, as hands in the service of a command economy. Rather, they are subjects situated in an economy of neighborliness. All of that is implicit in the reality and exhibit of divine rest. This is about community. This is about loving God, loving yourself, and loving your neighbor. And so if you look at the 10 commandments, and that it starts with loving God, and then you've got this bridge of Sabbath rest that links loving God to loving your neighbor. And in order to love your neighbor, you have to love yourself, right? So there's all of that goes together. And so the Sabbath rest day is an act of loving yourself and your neighbor. Because while you rest, you also give your neighbor rest as well. So, and your neighbor is, who did Jesus say? Everyone. So everyone gets to rest. And so it is an active rebellion against pagan society, against paganism in general. And you could say in our world, it's capitalism, but I think capitalism has become our pagan god. Don't label me a socialist, y'all. That's not it either. But I do think that there are some inherent flaws within capitalism, the Protestant work ethic, and all of the ways that we have rationalized overworking and overproducing. And then
one of the most insidious ways that the world has infiltrated the church has been this idea of constant work and constant production.
Yeah.
We find it in the rhythm of churches that there must be something on the calendar for every day, that we must always be doing something. We must always be having the next big thing. And this takes us into another topic we'll cover on another day, but the idea of the mega churches that are always doing the enormous productions that take so many people to do. It must always be larger than life. And every other church then tries to compete or keep up with that. But it also very much happens in the idea that our people in our pews expect our pastors to run at this breakneck, never take a rest speed to earn their keep. And they go back to a verse that says, the laborer is worth their wages in there. And Paul is actually arguing for the reason that some of them should be paid for what they do. We be paid, but we're going to manage your ego by paying you a pittance, and we're going to manage your Protestant work ethic by making sure you work yourself into the ground. And it's not helpful. It's not a good rhythm. The disciples, the apostles, after Jesus ascends, when they try to figure out how the rhythm of the church is going to be, is they say, we need some of you to focus on serving and some of you so that we can focus on what our job is, which is knowing the word, preaching the word, and teaching it correctly. And that takes time. That takes time being with God. It takes time studying. It takes time preparing. Doesn't mean that they too weren't serving and weren't going to do anything else, but protection of that time to do their responsibilities well. It flabbergasts me when I run into pastors in other places, particularly places where the church is truly under oppression. And we find pastors who are praying for hours a day, 2 to 5 hours a day of their life rhythm is expected to be spent in prayer. Whereas I find that in our society, many of us expect that the pastor will do their praying on their own time, your prep time. And I'll be honest that like I could fill my week with responsibilities that are, I call it administrivia. And everyone would be perfectly happy for me to do all of my sermon prep and all of the connection with God that is needed to do that well on my own time.
Yep.
And it's not healthy. It's not good for the church. It's not a good example for us to set. And it is not, we need to be teaching our people to slow down, to do less. I think about how difficult it is to add even 30 seconds to 1 minute of silence into a worship service. We can't, we have a low tolerance for that. But I often say that God doesn't yell at us. I think there are moments that God will get our attention by whatever means necessary. But most of the time, God's going to wait until we're ready to have a conversation or to listen. And we need to get still, be still, and know that I am God. And yet we are never still and quiet. And Sabbath is a cultivating of a being still and quiet.
A few years ago, how long has it been since you were doing the yoga classes at your church on Wednesday nights?
It's been about 18 months
Okay.
since I've been able to do them.
Right. So, and of course you were injured, so that's why that had to stop for a time. But during that year that I was carving out to come to your church, and just for y'all to know, I always, it's important to me that y'all know this, because everyone who knows me for any period of time is be like, Laura, you hate yoga. Well, this I don't hate yoga. First of all, what I do have always warned people about is that yoga is it's a Hindu worship practice, and it's a slippery slope when you're doing just the Hindu practice. So there's that. And just to be aware, I've always told people, be aware of what you're doing. Well, the yoga that Tammy leads is Christian yoga or yoga faith. And I went skeptical to the first, the one for her, but I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. We'll see. But I was actually kind of yearning for an alternative to my normal worship practices. And what I found in yoga faith is that I was getting all the things that everybody said they love about yoga, which is the stillness and the breathing and the quietness within and without. And and also doing that in the context of Jesus Christ and focusing on the creator God during all of that time, it turned into a full body act of worship, which
exactly
allows me to appreciate why Hindus do it. And that it also allows me to focus on the value that other religions have, and that we have a lot to learn from them. You know, we don't just cast them out because we don't believe in their God. You know, so we have different ideas of who and what God is, but there are ways of showing reverence to the one that is most important to you that I think we can learn, and showing reverence to the one true God, Jesus Christ, and, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, through full body worship is just amazing. And for me, it became a Sabbath keeping experience. For me too, also doing it in community was something else too. I've tried maintaining that discipline by myself, and it doesn't translate to the spiritual experience to me as much because I'm not doing it with people. So I don't know if there's a fellowship aspect to it that where two or more gathered, that kind of a thing that was feeding my soul. But there was something about the stillness about
There's
it.
also an aspect of doing it in community where someone else is guiding. You're not having to think about what you want to do next. You can release that as well.
True.
But there's great benefit to moving our body, helps
Right.
us move the stress through our body so that we can be still, which
Mhm.
is all of the movement, all of the moving your body and stretching is about getting ready to be still, which is why people who can't be still or who would opt out before we got to the stillness part, like you're missing the whole point to it. But it does become about Sabbath and about rest and relaxation. And I even found it interesting the number of people who couldn't, because it was 1 hour once a week on a Wednesday night after we had our Wednesday night fellowship meal, who couldn't find that hour to do things. And so it's interesting to me how we have talked ourselves out of the things that are most nourishing to our soul and our spirit. And we try to convince ourselves that we don't need them.
Mhm.
When we went, because we go, my husband and I like to go to Jamaica, and we go to a resort where everything's included. And so we just get to be, we don't have to think about stuff. You don't have to carry a wallet. You're just there. Um, we don't have internet except in the room.
Mhm.
So during the day, it does you no good anyway to carry a device. And for the very first time in my entire ministry, when we went, I turned my work email off on my phone. 20 years of ministry, and I have vacationed with my work email, thinking about things to be done. And that was the rhythm of my life because for the 5 years that I was in seminary, I was working part time doing retail merchandising, homeschooling my children, running a homeschool group with 300 families, taking a full load in seminary, pastoring 2 churches that were 42 miles away from where I lived. I was never not doing something. And I call that crisis mode.
Mhm.
You can function in crisis mode for a short period of time.
Yeah.
It's fight or flight. It's getting into our sympathetic nervous system. We aren't meant to live there. We're meant to function there in immediacy. And then we have to get back into our parasympathetic nervous system, get out of fight and flight, and get back into rest and digest and relax. And I did that for 5.5 years, and it created so much tension in my body that it has taken years to recover from. It's just not a healthy. We need this Sabbath rhythm in our lives.
Yeah, so that reminds me of I heard about this book, Sabbath as Resistance, at a clergy retreat with our denomination does for clergy every year, which is so wonderful. And I have not taken advantage of that since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I need to maybe consider doing that next year. But the theme was Sabbath. And the keynote speaker was Bruce Barkauer, who is a minister in our denomination. He just recently retired, bless his heart. And he talked about Sabbath living. And he talked about the book, and he presented a bunch of stuff about that book that I've already mentioned. But he also then talked about the idea of living Sabbathly. And I've never forgotten that. To live Sabbathly is different than taking a Sabbath day. Now, I take a Sabbath day. I take Monday. Obviously, Sunday is not Sabbath rest for me because that's a work day. That's the big work day of the week. And so I take Monday. And my church is pretty good at observing that. And it's funny, I get folks that come in and they're new and they'll try and call me on Monday. or text me on Monday. And then I'll have to explain to them, this is my Sabbath day. Is it okay if I call you tomorrow? What's your Sabbath? What does that mean? It's your Sabbath. And I have to explain that to them. And then they're like, oh, okay. Living Sabbathly is having a Sabbath mindset throughout the day, every day of the week, every week of the year, is thinking about taking a moment to pause, taking a moment to rest in God. You can, it's like yesterday when we were at the park. I was at the park with my boyfriend and our dogs, and I got back in the car after we were done running the dogs and all this kind of stuff. And he pulls out and drives away, and I'm still sitting in my car. And he calls me up. And he goes, "I have got to know this. I just don't understand this. Why is it every time you get in your car, you sit in the car for like 10 minutes before you drive anywhere? What is that?" Drives him nuts. And I said, well, I do it just because it drives you crazy. He was like, I knew you were going to say something like that. And then I said, because honestly, I like the quiet. And I had never really thought about it before until he asked me. I said, but I talk to people 24 hours a day. My job is talking and interacting with people. When I'm in the car by myself, there's no one. And I just soak in the opportunity to just sit in the car and be quiet, listen to music, listen to an audiobook, listen to nothing, play a game, whatever, and just sit and be still for a beat. I take a beat. And then sometimes when I pull into the parking lot at the church, or sometimes when I pull into the driveway, I take a minute before I jump out of the car and run in and get my day started. And it's this idea of living Sabbathly, of being intentional and purposeful, and to take these moments to say hi, God, to check in with yourself, to check in with God, to look around. I think they call that mindfulness. And I don't really care what hippie word it is. I like to think of it as a Sabbath mentality. And to take a bite of your food and to go, it's really good. And to savor that in the moment, and to just be able to rest into that, and to live that way, rather than having to fill every single second, every single minute of the day with another activity, with another productive moment. It's a different pace.
Yes.
And I saw you posted something about that, about changing your pace or something like that. You posted a reel.
Yeah. You don't need a better calendar. You don't need to schedule yourself better. You need to live into rhythms.
Yeah.
I believe that God created us to have a rhythm, and schedule is about acting like you're the same every single day, and that every day can be the same. So I do this at the same time, I do this, and I schedule this. A rhythm recognizes that we're different every single day. Our emotions, our needs, our energy level, our motivation. We have rhythms, and so we can anchor certain things. And I believe God teaches this. I think we see it in creation. God worked for 6 days and then rested. We know that the Almighty God doesn't have a need to rest, but chose to. I think we see it in the life of Jesus Christ, that he had 3.5 years, as best we can guess, to do all of his ministry. Short window of time, lots to do. And yet he goes to sleep on a boat and takes a nap. He withdraws from the crowds to have some time alone with God. He regularly withdraws from that and to take that Sabbath rest. I even see it in the pattern of creation. We have seasons: winter when we're dormant, spring when new things pop up, creativity and new life, summer where we have to endure the growth, the learning, the heat, the persevering to get the harvest in the fall and see the prettiness. And then we go back into dormancy. It's not all going all the time. There's also seasons of resting. I think we even see it in the day. And I think the day is the most beautiful one. That our Jewish brothers and sisters still calculate the day from sunset to sunset. We, using the Gregorian calendar, we do midnight to midnight, but even still, Midnight is in the night. But God, it says, an evening and morning were the first day, an evening and morning were the second day. We start with the rest. We
Yeah.
rest, we work, and we rest. And so we get into that rhythm. We don't earn the rest. We work out of the overflow of energy, creativity, and ideas that come from the rest.
Hmm.
And when we've used those, we rest again to get more. So yeah, we don't need to figure out how to multitask better or how to schedule better or how to, and I did that one time. I had a leadership coach who taught us to color code everything. This is your exercise time. This is your reading 1 hour a day. This is your office time. This is your sermon prep. Everything had a color, and you put it all in your calendar. It makes a really pretty Google calendar with all the colors on it. It's a nice rainbow.
Yeah.
Um, but it stressed me the hell out
Yeah.
just to look at my calendar. That doesn't work for me. I need a rhythm. I need a rhythm. I get up and I hit my yoga mat and I move my body and wake it up. And then I go into Shavasana, that rest at the end. Yep. But that Shavasana rest at the end transitions me perfectly into my prayer and Bible study time in the mornings. And then I'm ready to go downstairs and have coffee and spend a little bit of time with my husband before he goes to work. And then I can look at my calendar when he leaves and see what's on the calendar for today and how do I need to get going and where am I going to put things. That's a rhythm that works for me.
Yeah. And I go through periods in my life where I have those good rhythms and then I fall out of them again. Interestingly enough, Lent is a time of stupid rhythms, bad rhythms, bad, busy, 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 overwhelmed. Just put your head down and get through it. Crisis mode. And the closer
it is a good season for our parishioners, for our congregations to learn rhythm, and they tend to do it. But I think for clergy, it's a horrible time
it
to
is,
try to practice rhythms.
it's exhausting. And it doesn't matter how much I plan ahead or how much I plan or how little I plan. It doesn't matter. For some reason, Lent just is that. And it's funny, things will come at me that have nothing to do with Lent during the season. And everyone's like, what's going on? I'm like, it's Lent. Oh, no, it's Lent. It's just a season for me that, and I think for clergy in general, when we are just overscheduled, overstimulated, overthinking, overplanning, whatever, and we are leading up to that climax of Easter. And it was funny on Holy Week, I was running out of the house again at one point, and my mom's like, "Well, you just go all the time." So for those of you who don't know, my parents live with me now, and I said, "Well, Mom, it's Lent," and she goes, "I just don't think God intended it to be like that." And I thought, you know what? I thought about that in the car because I didn't have time to stand there and process it with her because I was busy. And I thought about it in the car and I thought, no, I'm okay with being stressed out on Holy Week because, in my own little weird way, it's a way of sort of um, living out the stress that Jesus had that week. You know, Holy Week was not a day of rest for Jesus. Holy Week was a day of hell. It was a living hell for him, just between anticipating what was coming and then actually then having to live through it. And I'm like, you know what? As my homage to Christ, I will endure this. Not to mention the fact that I love all the Holy Week stuff. I love all of
Yeah.
it. All of it.
Yeah.
It's just so inspiring and the creative juices and all that kind of stuff. But then the day after Easter, or no. By Easter afternoon, I'm numb. Like from here up, it's just numb. I'm just numb. And that lasts for about a week.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I go to work or not, whether I intend to go to work or not, whether I take vacation or not, I'm numb for that whole week just to recover because I need to rest and recover from all of that.
So if we think about it in terms of there being 6 days of work and a Sabbath rest, if we think about it in terms of rhythm, like the seasons, Lent would be summer for us. The busy growth season, the persevere, the push through, the stay on track and get it done. But I will say for me, Maundy Thursday services, Good Friday services, and Easter sunrise service. Now, full Easter service feels like work to me. I'm in work mode for it. But those three, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and a sunrise service on Easter, those are my autumn. Those are my harvest. That's when I reconnect and I see I've done all this work and now I get to live into seeing it. I find that a lot of times, particularly because you mentioned that we clergy, we're working on Sundays. So we take our Sabbath rest on another day. And I think that does become important to people who are really involved in their church, who are on staff, who are a really involved volunteer. You still need some time to rest. Find it if it's not on Sunday, because I don't think there's anything magical about Sunday. Sunday is not the original Sabbath. The original Sabbath was Friday, sundown to Saturday, sundown. We moved it to the day of the Lord for his resurrection. Some Christians, as we worked on separating ourselves from our Jewish brothers and sisters. But you have to find that rest. And so Sunday is work for us. And so I often feel I don't truly worship in the way that a lot of people think about worship in a worship service, because I'm always having to think about what is next.
What's next?
Is that person ready, or do they look like they're on? What is my next part? What am I doing? Because my job is to connect other people with God, and doing that in worship is one of those things. But I often find that even in the midst of that, in those Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday services, I find myself worshiping while leading worship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because we tend to slow down with those services. They tend to be more contemplative, more restful, more mindful, and help us lean into that. And I think the reason some people love them is because it does. And I think the reason some people don't is because it does.
Yeah.
If we're really busy, we resist being asked to rest or be still or be quiet for a minute. Sometimes we do it because we don't want to deal with the emotional stuff that comes up. If we quit moving, we may have to deal with our stuff.
Yeah.
And that can be hard, but the dealing with our stuff is what will make us healthier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Untangling Faith podcast. This was just part 1 of our conversation on Sabbath rest, and I hope it's already giving you permission to pause, to breathe, and to question the pace you're living at. Be sure to come back next week for part 2 as we go even deeper into what Sabbath can look like in real life. In the meantime, if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend or leave a review. It's a small thing that helps more people find this podcast. And until next time, may you find just one moment to rest, not because you've earned it, but because you were made for it. Bye. We love you.